I think, therefore I am. But I'm thinking all the time, and I don't know who I am. Am I? Are you? I'm in the middle of nowhere, and it's a good place to be. Welcome to Just Nowhere with Dr. Samuel Zinner. First, I want to thank you.
Okay, let's do it.
Yes, thank you. The reason I contacted you, right, for today's topic, right, is because of some relatively recent news reportage. Let's say it that way. I think it was back in January that television channels like BBC and others like that were having this headline, right? Cave art, cave signs decoded or or deciphered, right? And so
Deciphered.
I've
It
I've
was
now
deciphered. Yeah.
yes, yes. But anyway, this is the verbiage, right, of the popular press, and so it caught my
Mhm.
attention. I looked into it, and right, so then I found a peer-reviewed article. The lead author is Bennett Bacon in London, and he has quite a prestigious team, I think, that's been working with him, and that were all co-authors or group authors with him in the main paper, right? And the other paper I was interested in is an even newer paper by Lee Berger on Homo Naledi. So we'll talk about both of those, but we'll start with the first one, which is the Bennett Bacon essay, right? So
Right.
we'll jump right into it. Can you tell us the basic outlines, right? What's that essay about, and how does it strike you, right? The argumentation.
Frankly, first time I saw the headline, it reminded me of an article that was published, I don't know, 2 years ago or something.
Hmm.
Uh, but upon checking, I saw the date. Hey, this is fresh. Let's
Hmm.
read it. Why? Because I'm very interested in such stuff. Because it somehow aligns with my own views on the topic,
Hmm.
especially that finally someone addresses the abstract marks within the caves that attract attention through their beautifully executed, iconic paintings,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Upon reading the abstract, what surprised me, I have a personal acquaintance. Uh, he is interested in similar things.
Hmm.
He's a biologist by profession, and he has studied for, I may say, for decades, the
Hmm.
migration of the salmon in North America, okay, the
Hmm.
northwest coast. And he has reached the conclusion, I mean, he forwarded his
Hmm.
opinion, namely that the abstract, and he brought up the example of the famous stag in Lascaux,
Yes.
that there are some dots, a rectangle, some lines, 13 of them, all in all, okay?
Hmm.
And he said this is a representation of what he calls biological time. And what is exactly biological time? It is precisely what Mr. Bennett describes,
Hmm.
with a stress on the rotting period, on not rotting, but rotting, okay,
Hmm.
uh, mating. Um, this is the emphasis of Mr. Bennett, but there are lots of other factors there, okay?
Sure.
How to read the traces, when is the meat at its best for consumption,
Hmm.
um, seasons, and lunations, as Mr. Bennett also notices.
Yes.
So the idea is not new. What is new in comparison to Bernie Taylor's paper is that Mr. Bennett and colleagues invested a lot of work. They're not simply they do. They never say, hey, this is it, we decoded it, we deciphered it.
Mhm.
Any further discussion is unwanted. We know the truth. It's not like that.
Of
They
course, yes.
present a hypothesis and they come up with the evidence that supports their hypothesis, which at the end of the paper is still an open hypothesis.
Mhm.
And this is the right approach. Now, having Paul Petit on the team as a co-author makes the paper very credible.
Mhm.
There were lots of reactions. What is Mr. Bennett doing? He's restoring furniture. Okay.
Sure.
So immediately he was dismissed. He's not a professional. He doesn't belong to the club. So why
Right.
should we take him seriously? On one hand, they missed the name Petit as a co author. And second, someone who restores furniture. He has an eye for detail. He knows
Mhm.
exactly how lines are incised. How much effort does it take to incise a line?
Right.
He can differentiate between a scratch, an accidental scratch, or a
Mhm.
consciously marked or incised pattern, whatever. So, him having the profession he's having is only a plus from my perspective.
Mhm.
Because perhaps he sees details that, let's say, orthodox paleoanthropologists won't notice. And he knows what he's talking about. Now, I am especially interested, and that's why you invited me most likely,
Mhm.
in abstract images,
Right. The geometric signs.
geometric signs, random patterns, or patterns that repeat themselves. My interest is shared not only by Mr. Bennett, but by Genevieve von Petzinger, who says that after a meticulous analysis of all these signs, uh, she forwards hypothesis that this is a very neutral hypothesis. It's not so controversial. That this is an Upper Paleolithic graphic communication system,
Mhm.
which it is. What else can it be? Okay, nobody goes and doodles or engraves signs in a dark cave only for his or her own satisfaction when it doesn't have a meaning.
Right.
And meaning is shared. And this is why these marks are important, because they are shared. They imply the presence of a community, the knowledge of being part of a community, and a shared construct of reality. How do we perceive reality? And this brings me to the definition of such art like uh, products, okay?
Mhm.
Perietal or portable art like things. And they're a chord. Let's now start with Badnarik, okay, or with Donald, who before Badnarik coined the term exogram.
Yes.
These externally stored memory traces.
Mhm.
And Badnarik refined the meaning of exograms, okay,
Mhm.
stored outside the brain, okay. He says this is information that is stored outside the brain, and but we cannot call it art, but only paleo art, which is as well an art-like production to which we don't have ethnological access. And this is very important. We don't have the faintest idea what it means. There's no living Neanderthal or early Homo sapiens in Europe who can tell us what it means.
Right.
So we can only guess. And we can project our own construct of reality where time, and I will return to time because here time is important and not the measurement of time.
Mhm.
It is the introduction of a kind of a linear time in contrast to the cyclic perception of events. It is somehow a transition that we see in these marks that accompany animals, that represent iconic animal
Mhm.
figures. I'll come back to this later.
All right.
Um, so I was with exograms, okay,
All right.
and with paleo art. As everybody who reads that paper knows, there are abstract signs, geometric signs, on iconic representations. They come mostly by themselves, unaccompanied by any other sketches or
Mhm.
iconically represented animals, and they are very old. The
Mhm.
oldest, I mean, what some say there are 1 million-year-old signs in the Kozarnica cave in Bulgaria. I
Yes.
don't know. I don't know. And I can't say yes or no, but what I believe, and at Bildungsleben in Germany, there are scratches, etchings, repeated sequences etched on animal bone and on stone. And I was fortunate enough to talk to the archaeologist who's doing the excavations there. And I've no doubt that the date he assigns to these etchings, 600,000 years, is credible.
Mm.
And there's nothing surprising here. There was no Homo sapiens around.
Right.
Um, I think we are past this phase when we attributed everything cognitively, let's say, complex, only and only to Homo sapiens.
Mhm.
In the last years, we have recognized the cognitive abilities of Neanderthals and other hominins.
Mhm.
So there's nothing surprising here.
Right.
And there are the iconic signs, which suddenly they were associated once upon a time when I learned about them with an upper Paleolithic revolution. Superman came, conquered Europe, and brought his superior cognitive abilities. And hey, we have the trace, they were there. Okay?
Mhm.
Um, this is not like that, and we know that as well.
Right.
What is interesting is that there is an artificial hierarchy. We say, okay, it is based on something. Okay, it's not out of thin air. Abstract geometric representations, being older, they precede more sophisticated, so to say, or more cognitively demanding iconic representation.
Yes.
Okay, but there is a problem here. Let's say the outline of an animal was drawn in sand and the wind blew it away, together with the footprints of the artist. How do we know? We don't know.
Right.
And there's a very interesting anecdote. Uh, in the Andaman Islands, there is this Negrito tribe, the Jarawa.
Yes.
For long, in 1994, when I was there was still no contact with them. They were still considered to be dangerous. Okay? Since then, anthropologists made contact. There was a road cutting through their forest. Now they're kind of a tourist attraction.
Mhm.
Anyway, these Jarawas have very complex geometric patterns with which they decorate their ustensiles, their utilitarian
Mhm.
baskets, mats, chest guards, belts, and so on and so
Mhm.
on. And they have a meaning. They signify something. They stand for something. In this sense, they're symbols. Okay?
Yes.
And for long, because the Jarawas are so primitive, everybody considered them to be primitive. They said, hey, they're probably, in the beginning, they said they couldn't make fire. Okay?
Right.
They were considered at this stage. But it was taken for granted that, well, they don't have any iconic representation. There's nothing there. And one day after the years after the Indian government opened the Andaman Trunk Road, a Jarawa child was hit by a bus and
Mm.
taken to a hospital in Port Blair. Now imagine coming straight out of the forest, okay, from a hunter-gatherer group, small band of people, to the hustle and bustle of Port Blair, into a hospital where aliens walk around with white lab coats
Mhm.
and probe him with needles and everything. He was craving for the forest, the environment that he knew.
Sure.
And what did he start doing? They noticed they gave him, what do nurses do? They bring paper, pens to keep a child patient entertained. And he started drawing plants, animals, everything he knew from his forest home
Hmm.
with beautifully, like a trained artist.
Hmm.
Uh, when anthropologists discovered this, they were puzzled. They went to the Jarawa, they tried to find out why don't they draw when the talent is known.
Hmm.
And they say, the elders, why should we? That is something meaningless. It's a childish thing. Only children do it. They do it in the sand, they do it on tree bark, but that's not important. Look at these patterns here. They have a meaning. So the question is, even if the ability exists, and I believe it existed well before the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, why doesn't it come to expression? Because there is no need for it.
Mm. All right.
Other things have more meaning. And I remember your interview with uh, Mr. Bacon. At a point, you asked him whether children were involved in the execution of what we call rock art in the
Mm.
Franco-Canadian
All
caves.
right. Right.
There are studies, lots of them, and we know, I mean, from snow to, okay, it is scale. There are lots of studies. I can give you links if you want to. There are not only palm impressions, I mean handprints, there are children's footprints in the mud in
Hmm.
Shobek. Children were regularly taken to these caves, and they had their part. Not only, I think, not only in leaving their handprints on the walls. Now, what is so special about children? Now, why were these qualities, these childish qualities, that are not important? Everybody can draw a mammoth or
Hmm.
something. Why did they suddenly become important? Now, and this I can link to another question that you asked Mr. Bennett about a possible role of autism
Hmm.
in the execution of such mm, beautifully done
Yeah. Yes,
painting.
if I may cut in here. So during that part of the interview with Mr. Bacon, I pointed out that the autism expert Alan Snyder, right, is noticed, he's published on this fact, that some autistic children have these amazing artistic abilities, and you can compare their drawings of animals with paintings, right, by Cézanne or other great artists, and really there's virtually no difference. It's quite amazing. And those autistic children who have had relatively successful therapy, right, and they've been able to overcome at least
They lost their ability.
they lost this ability. But I failed to point out, I think, in that interview that what is the distinguishing feature of these children, these autistic children's drawings of horses, for example, is that they portray the horse in movement, right? And for most children or even adults, right, this is a skill that has to be taught to them, right? In art class or whatever setting, this doesn't come easily or naturally, right? And so that's what we see, like in Lascaux and the cave paintings, right? These wonderful paintings, right? You see the movement, right, of the animals, and so that's why I suggested to him, right, or asked him, right, might there be some kind of role that autism played, right, in the Upper
I think,
Paleolithic or whenever.
I think yes. At the end of the day, what is autism? I mean, something that was considered pathological a decade ago, it's considered quite normal today.
Mm-hmm.
But what is it? What are its main manifestations? Uh, Creativity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Playfulness, uh, so on and so on. To come to straight to the point, it is somehow a retention of juvenile characteristics into adulthood.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Would you agree with that so far?
Yes, so far. I would point out quickly, right, that experts now, medical experts, right, talk of a continuum, right, autistic continuum,
Exactly. We'll
right,
get to schizophrenia as well.
right, between on the one end are those who are low functioning, right, and then the other side are high functioning, right, and so, and a lot of the high functioning autistic individuals will have some of these incredible skills in numerosity and art and memory, and yet they will then suffer social interaction defects at the
That's
same
it.
time.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And this is the crux of the matter. I
Yes.
mean, you said they do it naturally. Yes,
Hmm.
that's the point. They do it naturally. They're unconditioned.
Yes.
There was a very interesting article, Benitez, Buraco et al. Okay, it appeared, I think, 2014 or so.
Hmm.
And they hypothesized that autists are the least domesticated humans, while schizophrenics are the most domesticated humans.
Hmm.
Now, to understand this, we have to think that we live in a cultural niche,
Yes.
in a construct of reality where the rules, we have devised the rules, the do's and don'ts, behavioral norms,
Of course.
and this is culture.
Hmm.
And as we can adapt to a biological environment, or I doubt it if we can, our ancestors or modern and contemporary hunters and gatherers,
Hmm. Right.
if they adapt to an environment, everybody has a cultural niche. I mean, the Bushman in
Sure.
the deepest Kalahari is a cultural being, just like
Sure.
us. Only, let's say, his filters to the natural environment, the cultural filters are less opaque. Okay?
Hmm.
They're transparent. They live still in a natural environment. We have totally cut off ourselves from this environment. Our
Hmm.
environment is culturally constructed, culturally presented, understood, its values culturally transmitted. relying on cultural transmission methods, and so on. Now, I use the word domesticated. I don't mean it that people say, okay, not like
Right.
that. But we adapt to our environment, and every kind of adaptation means kind of a domestication,
Sure. Sure.
especially where the term self-domestication is used.
Hmm.
It is our cultural construct. We adapt to it, to its norms. Everybody who can't do it is a social outcast.
Hmm.
Perhaps he, she has other talents that are not so important or meaningful in our cultural frame.
Right.
Okay. So this is where I make the nexus between autism, creativity, and prehistoric rock art.
Hmm.
Because to make it even more clear, I see abstract signs. They appear at a stage in our evolution, and I will return to this when it comes to the Berger article about Homo Naledi.
Hmm.
Uh, Starting with Homo erectus, the brain became so complex
Yes.
that as an information storage device, it became kind of overburdened, so
Hmm.
to say.
Yes.
Too much information. What is information? Practically, it is memory. It is memory traces, because memory doesn't exist as a whole. It's made up of component information, bits, and so on, stored in different parts of the brain.
Yes.
When there is an external stimulus, like, do you remember your first kiss?
Hmm.
And what was it a summer day? Did it rain? When there is something similar, somehow you remember it. There's a whole scene that,
Yes.
okay, there must be a stimulus, something that triggers out a memory, unites the memory traces, and presents them as a coherent memory.
Hmm.
That's not the problem. The problem is that memory can be manipulated. You can have memories of things that you have never experienced, but you are convinced that it is your own personal memory.
Right. Right.
So imagine a big brain with all those memory traces that cannot be communicated. I mean, they have memories, but one is inconsistent with the other, and nothing works out.
Hmm.
Uh, Memory itself is individual memory that is phenomenal experiences that I have had. Okay,
Hmm.
nobody knows about them. They're my sweet memories. Doesn't matter how I remember them, correctly or not. And there is collective memory. Now, collective memory is, or access memory, that a member of a group, a band, a community can have access to a pool of memory traces
Hmm.
that defines our identity, our belonging to the group, uh, and it is organized, sequenced, and sequences are very important here, especially
Yes.
in the neuropsychological literature, the
Yes.
sequencing quality of how information can be properly sequenced.
Yes.
And um, and when it is properly sequenced and it can be read by everybody, then it becomes a collective memory, be it correct or not. I mean, we all
Hmm.
were manipulated into believing that it is our communal memory.
Hmm.
We can share it, we can talk about it. Some type of communication is needed. Uh, and this is practically external memory storage. Now, I told you sequencing is very important, and
Right.
sequences are not only sequencing abstract signs, but sequencing vocalizations,
Hmm.
rhythm, the origins of music. I won't say speech, but vocal communication. I
Hmm.
don't like the expression proto language, proto music, and so on.
Sure, sure.
But something on its way to be developed into speech as we know it.
Hmm.
Uh, and this sequencing and this training of the collective memory is done through ritual. It is ritual where we make, according to a rhythm, we do the proper vocalizations, we learn sequences. Out of these learned sequences, we can remember the oh, who means perhaps it was always in context of something.
Hmm. Yes.
So when I want to evoke a phenomenon, I vocalize the sequence that the other one who participates in the same corroboree or ritual activity as
Hmm.
I do will understand my meaning. Or if I don't vocalize, I will hum something or beat out a rhythm.
Hmm.
Or in sand, why on rock? At this point, it's not necessary. You understand my general meaning?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so this is collective memory, and this
Hmm.
is already a cultural category. Individual memory is pure biology. How memory traces, call them engrams, whatever you want to,
Sure.
how organized in the brains, how memory cheats us, and
Hmm.
so on. But communal, cultural memory is already something that can be transmitted, not only from
Yes,
the brain, but from this generation to the next. It's
yes.
not because it is a fancy construct of reality, but it is kind of a honing down all the probabilities of information that are in superposition in our brain,
Hmm.
give a causal perception of an environment that is adaptive,
Hmm.
biologically adaptive, evolutionary adaptive.
Yes.
And this activity is not only discernible in ritual, but also in tracking.
Hmm.
Tracking is as well you build up a hypothesis based on information, memory traces, and so on,
Yes.
regarding a specific animal's behavior in at specific times in the calendric year, and so on. And this brings us back to Mr. Bennett,
Hmm.
because what a good Bushman tracker can read from spores, Mr. Bennett says that his European, West European uh, Homo sapiens
Hmm.
cousin couldn't do, but he had to refer to signs drawn or incised in the recesses of a dark cave where nobody could see them.
Right, right.
I'm not critical. This is only a caveat, okay?
Sure, sure.
I'm not critical because in the article, Bennett et al. Say that their work was not restricted to cave art, but also to rock shelters or separate borders
Hmm.
or wherever they found. Unfortunately, they are not mentioned by name.
Hmm.
So he's building his hypothesis in the article. He's still working on it. He'll
Right, right.
be busy a lifetime. I mean, I don't envy Mr. Bennett. He has a
Right.
lot of work to do.
Yes.
But why in the dark recesses of a cave?
Hmm.
And the first thing that comes to my mind is initiation. It is knowledge, it is information, okay, that has to be transmitted.
Hmm.
So this comes to, otherwise I don't see why would you, or there must be some belief that you influence as well the cycles, the biological cycles of the animals, because there are some hypotheses that cave art was in these recesses because that's where animal spirit was born.
Hmm.
And but this is already in the realm of speculation. So,
Sure. Yes.
but just to come back to the idea before, once memory traces are external, they can be read. Now, you can't
Yes.
expect in a small population, in a small band, that everybody has exogram literacy, that everybody can read them.
Hmm.
Because there are rules how to store them, and there are rules how to read them. And what I hypothesize, okay, that
Yes.
metric marks, starting, let's say, 500,000 years ago, up to the Upper Paleolithic, were kind of a zooming in.
Hmm.
That means honing down the information, trying to build up a cultural environment that works according to its own logic, causality,
Mm.
in which
Yes.
we can function and survive well, not hungrily. While the Upper Paleolithic iconic explosion, because there was an iconic explosion, that's
Yes.
nothing to say about it, maybe it is the search for an unfocused state of mind that counters this zoomed in state, which tens of millennia of cultural evolution got us stuck in it.
Mm. Hmm.
We have to escape it from time to time to understand, especially in changing environments and so on, to understand other realities, perhaps alternative forms of reality.
Hmm.
Uh, how should I put it? Is there is an author, Lian Gabora,
Yes.
and in the tradition of Penrose and Hameroff, she tries to construct a quantum understanding of consciousness. And she has a hypothesis, it's called contextual focus.
Hmm.
And this is only, I recap shortly. Lots of information, okay?
Right.
They combine randomly and evolutionary seen, adaptively seen. There are too many possibilities, too many actions that can be taken, too many possibilities.
Yes.
The saber tooth eats me till I react, till I analyze all those possibilities given by the information that I store in my big brain.
Right.
So, culturally, in a small group, later bigger groups, or there is contact between groups, we develop an ability to hone down this information to what is really useful.
Hmm.
I
Yes.
mean, delete the unuseful information,
Hmm.
and you understand in great lines. This is zooming in the contextual focus.
Yes.
But let's say the operational range of this cognitive ability can get stuck in the causal end.
Mm. Yes.
And then all of a sudden, we need the help, if we want to escape it, the help of those members of our group who are still not conditioned enough to our cultural prescriptions and who can still build up improbable constructs of reality. You understand what I mean? This
Yes. Yes.
brings the children into the picture
Yes.
because they have this ability. So this is the period when the so-called shaman, to use a very general term, the ritual
Mhm.
specialist,
Right, right, right.
starts hallucinating, entering all kind of alternate states of consciousness. It becomes
Right,
suddenly
right.
popular. Why? There was a need for it. It is a form of escape, and it is. And I see and shamans usually, if you read the literature, there are so many who were categorized as schizophrenic. That means a bit to the other end of the continuum where
Yes.
autism is as well. So yes, I say that autism and schizophrenia as well have to do something with iconic representation during the Upper Paleolithic.
Hmm. Hmm.
Children might have been present, maybe they didn't do the paintings, nobody will ever know.
Right.
They were there. Let's say I see them as ritual managers of a ritual specialist who considers their visions or alternate takes on reality or alternate
Hmm.
possibilities of reality. And just a last point, Richard, have you ever heard about the Siemens experience, Siemens Black Gorilla?
No.
Okay, because this illustrates what I mean by deleting unnecessary information and not
All right.
building it into a causal order of our
Hmm.
cultural environment.
Hmm.
There were two teams. This is an experiment. Dressed blue and white.
All right.
They had boars, uh, red and white boars, and they were given pretty complex instructions: who has to throw the ball to whom, who has to catch them to whom.
Hmm.
Again,
All right.
and while they were doing that, a person clad in a black gorilla fur
Hmm.
simply walked between them from one end of the stage, because this was staged, to the other.
Right, right, right.
So when the game was over, Dr. Siemens comes and, well, they expected all kind of, did we do that right? Did we concentrate? It needed concentration, focus. He asked them about the black gorilla. Nobody remembered the black gorilla crossing through their group while they were concentrating on their game.
Hmm. Right, right,
You get it. So
right.
reality is something as well. It's based on memory, how we remember things, how we build up memory traces, how we recombine them.
Hmm.
And it tends to ignore certain things. When I'm having a fight with my wife, then she tends not to remember certain things. She erased them.
Sure.
She wasn't constantly, it's not what she was interested in. Her memory of an event is very different from my memory of the same event.
Yes.
So it is like that.
Yes.
Um, so this is only to have an idea about the rapport between iconic and un-iconic representation. I can't say this preceded this. We don't know since when
Right.
the
Of
really
course.
iconic representation exists. When it appears in the archaeological record, not Chauvet, but in Sulawesi, the wild boar 42,000 years ago,
Hmm.
already executed. It denotes a tradition,
Yes.
not that I invent drawing. And drawing in itself is not important. In Blombos, Hansherwood, after advertising, okay, the piece of ochre that comes up in the Berger article as well,
Hmm.
with incised patterns in a lump of ochre, 2 years ago they discovered the first drawing. That means that was already a crayon. That means the pigment transferred to a surface.
Yes. All right.
But
Right.
that was a very accidental find, and some few tens of thousands of years, they went on engraving things. Although they knew how to draw, they knew that pigment can be transferred from one thing to a surface. Okay.
Right.
So in the Upper Paleolithic, when there is this explosion in iconicity, I think that we all know that there were huge environmental changes.
Yes.
There was a need for a new rapport with the environment.
Hmm.
Where are we? Looking for answers, strategies, uh, evolutionary strategies, how to cope with the new realities. And
Survival
every
strategies. Yes.
even if coming from children or schizophrenics, was welcome. Now, regarding specifically the abstract science that Mr. Bennett took under his analyze them, well, I can't say a thing. It is a very meticulous analysis,
Hmm.
well conducted, self consistent. I can't argue with it.
Hmm.
And I have no doubt all this, what does it record? What Mr. Bennett thinks, suggests. He doesn't go further. He suggests, okay,
Hmm.
that it records these important stages in an animal's life, especially prey animals.
Yes.
That implies an intimate knowledge of the animal and
Yes.
its behavior, especially when people in this period could easily enter the mind of the animal and become the animal.
Hmm.
The stag, you know the painting with the therianthropes and I could go on forever
Yes.
with the
Hmm.
Bushman belief tracking when they become the animal, they start thinking like the animal.
Right.
But they have this understanding. This is another thing that leaves me kind of wondering. Uh, Kalahari's son, Bushman,
Yes.
they have an intimate knowledge of an animal. They can tell you, every child has them. They don't have to keep records of it. They don't have to. Their art or art like production is centered on absolutely different things. But this is knowledge that is there in the community and
Hmm.
everybody possesses it.
Right.
And I've noticed with ethnographic groups, how should I call them, hunters gatherers, or
Hmm.
um, um, we are very specialized in the upper paleolithic with the shaman and things. It was the first division of labor practically,
Hmm. Right. Right.
uh, concurring with Jacques Ellul, who sees art, shamanism, and all these things interrelated, and sees them as the first division of labor. And it is so. It is the ritual specialist. He's the first specialist.
Hmm.
But
Right.
generally speaking, in other societies, in more egalitarian societies, knowledge is shared like meat.
Yes.
That is, ritual is meant to share knowledge. Uh, in a Bushman community in the 1950s, 1960s, now I can't cite according to whom, but who did field work. One third of the women of the women and two-thirds of the men could enter trance at will,
Mm-hmm.
and this either during a trance dance or while trekking. As I told, becoming the animal, and it's a trance-like state, or
Yes.
the state of consciousness practically based on other causalities, not our
Sure.
own
Sure.
reconstructed ones, and so on. So
Right.
these people have such intimate knowledge of all these cycles in an animal's life, and they share this knowledge like meat, as I, everything is shared. They're egalitarian not only when it comes to eating, but when it comes to knowledge and
Yes.
other things too. That somehow they didn't or we don't know about it, feel the need to record, to invest in sizing or painting these lines, dots, Ys, and so
Hmm. Hmm.
so perhaps because of the environmental upheavals in Ice Age Europe or during the Upper Paleolithic, suddenly there was a need not to be
Yes.
a ritual specialist, but to record changing or shifting behavioral patterns with animals. So this is what I think.
Right.
Otherwise, I
Yes.
can't explain it.
Yes. Yes.
And
Because of the shifting climate.
uh,
Yes.
that's how I can explain it.
Right. Right. Right.
Okay, maybe there are animals migrate. Maybe the geographical areas where you could find certain prey, the prey retreated to the south or changed its migration patterns, or
Hmm.
where can you find them when in a changing reality. Doesn't
Hmm.
matter what we know already for 10,000 years since we eat these animals, or hundred thousands of years. There's a new reality. We have
Yes.
to hone down, get a causal understanding of it, and survive.
Hmm.
So
Yes. Well, if I may interject here, what you say about the ability to get inside animals' minds, the way I would understand this is, well, take for example the Epic of Gilgamesh. We have Gilgamesh, right, and his well-known friend Enkidu, who's living among the animals, right? So he hasn't been quote unquote civilized yet, and what I use that word civilized in the etymological sense, right? So please don't misunderstand me.
I
Uh,
don't know it. Yeah.
what I'm saying is he has not been cityfied yet, right? Um, he's on the other side of the city walls, right? Still
Unfunded.
living, yes, as a hunter gatherer, and those who are inside the city walls, right, have been to a degree severed, right, from the rest of the animals. And this brings to mind Theodore Roszak, his a psychologist who would treat depression often by telling his patients to leave the city, go out by a river, go out among the trees, right, and get back in touch with a part of yourself that, right, the city walls cuts off from you. So it's producing this self alienation of a part of ourselves.
Very good.
But in any case, one could imagine that among hunter gatherers, that is, those who have not been confined to the structures of the city wall that developed, right, with, let's say, mass agriculture and all of this that led to the first large cities, they still have this close contact, right, with the other animals. They're probably not thinking of the other animals as, um, well, let's say the other, right? There's still some great continuity, right? And so it would probably be quote unquote natural, a natural ability, right, to get inside the minds of the other animals, right? So anyway, that would be my understanding.
It
Um,
is.
yes, yes,
And
and also I would add to that, since I mentioned Theodore Roszak and depression, that these structures, we call them modern structures, but of course they're also pre-modern. They go back to at least places like Sumer, as you know. I mean,
they
when we
were
have,
modern at their time. Yeah.
yes, yes. So would it not be the case that this would and we are the heirs of that today in our modern city states. So so why is it doesn't it seem that there is this proliferation, right, of depression, mental disorders, that we do not see this, at least not to this degree, among, let's say, gorillas, chimpanzees, dogs,
Mhm.
cats.
Mhm.
So is this a price that has to be paid
It is.
to have
Uh,
this
yeah.
complexified cognitive apparatus, and where, right, where's
No,
it going to lead?
well, yes.
It's another topic, but
Supposed to
if
say
you
that? Is it okay on your podcast? But I like calling our species the mad ape.
mm, mhm,
And we are suffering from mad. That means mad ape disease.
mm,
Now, what is this? Tens of millennia of cultural evolution. Evolution, generally, take biological evolution.
all right.
There are two tendencies: generalization, specialization.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes. Okay.
If you're generalized, you don't choose. It's happening, evolution.
Right.
But
Right.
if you are
Exactly.
on a generalized path, you um, let's say this is through neoteny that uh, you retain, let's say, uh, mm, features of your ancestors, okay,
All right.
and you take uh, juvenile features that become permanent in adulthood.
Yes. Yes.
Why? Because this makes you more flexible. You are not so specialized.
Hmm.
You're not only for clawing, you can do lots of things with your hand. Hand is a
Yes.
biological primitivism, okay?
Yes.
So you are more flexible. While you adapt yourself to an environment, you become very, very specialized.
Right.
In the end, it is the green bug who is green in the green forest, but when the forest turns brown, the bird comes and eats the outstanding green bugs.
Yes.
I mean, you can't change anymore. You become rigid.
Yes.
The environment fluctuates, changes, you're gone. Now, normally, this generalized form of adaptation, of evolution, at a certain stage becomes cultural evolution.
Yes.
Uh, and when does it becomes cultural evolution? In the past, you see always our technologies, industries, they last forever.
Yes.
There are different types of hominins that use the same technology. That means that without naming now the Aulla or this or that or the Mosteria or okay,
Right.
but this means that the biological evolution of the hominin using this technology is faster than the evolution of the technology that he is using.
Yes. I see.
And there is a point when the speed, the rate of technological innovation surpasses that of biological evolution.
Yes.
All of a sudden, Neanderthals as well adopt Upper Paleolithic Châteauperonian, and there are lots of Volusian, and there is a big
Mm,
list of industries that were initially attributed to Homo sapiens sapiens, and what is Upper Paleolithic, Middle Paleolithic, Neolithic,
mhm,
Chalcolithic, Bronze Age, Iron Age, shorter
mhm.
culture stuff. We have to adapt to our own culture.
Yes. Yes.
And this, we pay a price for that because we are
Mhm.
biologically still not built for that. We are still, but we have to adapt to our culture. So we become
Right.
weaker, we become more neotenous, domestication syndrome, in other
Hmm.
words. And this is neoteny, which is recognized as being one of a dimension of human evolution.
Yes. Yes.
Now, Bruce Charlton, I think, in 2006 or 66, wrote a book, The Boy Genius.
No. Yes. Yes.
Okay, and he states that there is something called psychological neoteny. What does it mean? That, let's say, I think many times I think, hey, am I an um, what do you call it? Am I still? Why do I still feel like a child? Like not growing up? Being playful, creative, uh, solving at once complex mathematical things, or doing suddenly discovering that I have an aptitude, a talent for drawing, that I'm very talented in it.
Hmm.
And this is called psychological neoteny. And what does Dr. Charton say? Who displays this psychological neoteny? Children, natural people,
Hmm.
scientists, artists. Remember, here only scientists and artists are already culturally defined, conditioned, but remember
Yes,
children and natural people, whatever that is.
sure.
And remember the anthropological discourse of the 19th century, early 20th century, when natural people were considered childish.
Hmm. Right, right.
Why were they childish? Because in their minds they could accommodate constructs of reality that logically seen are impossible.
Hmm.
They accommodate such differing views and they accept them. And this
Yes.
is exactly that they can zoom out this, what I called, Liangabora called contextual focus.
Hmm.
They have
Yes.
access to more. They see the black gorilla,
Hmm. Right.
Simon's black gorilla. And that's why they were, and they behave like that. Whenever someone returns with a gazelle or something, all of a sudden everybody starts singing, dancing,
Yes.
display joy that only children can display such joy.
Yes.
So there is something, and these are those who are, don't get me wrong, they're not the noble savage. They
Right.
live in a cultural construct of reality. I can't emphasize this enough.
Hmm.
They have their culture, but their culture is more flexible.
Yes.
Now,
Yes. Yes.
cultural evolution as well, you go either to specialization or you follow a generalized line. And what
Yes.
is
That's right.
cultural specialization? When you can't survive outside the walls of the city,
Right.
to
Right.
it gets, and that
Exactly.
makes you, that's your word, that makes you, uh, you are, let's say, you build your cultural niche. And you know the niche construction theory, when they say that it can have lead to maladaptations and
Yes.
particular disorders.
Hmm.
And that's how we today, unfortunately, I call myself included, mad ape. This is a
Hmm.
human condition.
Well, I guess let's transition to Lee Berger's paper. The really the main point that I'm interested in right there, as I conveyed to you earlier in email, is that in this paper he has a photograph of an etching, supposedly or apparently by this Homo Naledi, and it bears a striking resemblance to an attested, probably more than one, but at least an attested Neanderthal etching. And so uh, I was quite curious about your opinion, right? First of all, about, of course, Lee Berger's article, um, which has been, there's a lot of controversy, right, about it, at least online.
Yeah,
And but in any case, that
rightly so.
etching is very, very perplexing to me, because it's so strikingly similar, right, to something that
Yes,
Neanderthals, with a much larger, much more
yes.
complex cognitive apparatus
Mhm.
produced. So, what are your thoughts there?
Well, rightly so, the controversy. It's a very difficult pill to swallow. And this takes me straight from Mr. Bennett's article. You didn't give me time to say, hey, Mr. Bennett, and team, of course,
Uh,
or the co-authors,
uh,
they did.
uh, yes,
It's a big contribution to the field. It
yes,
doesn't mean that everything was deciphered and we know everything. The authors know that. They
mm,
don't
yes,
claim more than that. And I say, whenever you find iconic representation accompanied by geometric patterns,
mhm,
you should dig out Mr. Bennett's article and give it a chance. I mean, this is an angle that from now on, willy nilly, you will have to adopt.
yes,
Otherwise,
I agree. Yes,
no analysis will be complete, taking in all the components.
mhm, yes, yes,
Okay, so that's why I see it an important contribution.
mhm,
Now, coming to Lee Berger, and everybody tends to forget John Hawkes, who's the second author.
yes, yes,
Now, with authors like this, whatever they say has to be taken seriously at face value.
mhm,
These are credible scholars. They
mhm,
don't fabricate data.
right.
Uh, I mean, at the end of the article, there is even a list of all known Homo sapiens who has entered the cave since it was opened.
That's right. Yes, yes.
None of them fabricate that.
Mhm,
So I wasn't there. Lee Berger had to be on diet for 2 weeks to squeeze through
mhm,
channel to the antechamber.
yes,
Okay. Um, Not so many people have been there. The photos look authentic enough, and the description itself. I mean, Berger takes care of it. He knows what he's doing. Okay,
mhm,
can he? He adopts every possible angle. He takes a look from every possible angle. He knows exactly this sign was the first one, then the other sign came over it. I mean, there is a quantitative analysis of all the etchings
mhm, yes, yes,
are there. Of course, there is controversy because who would have thought of such a small brained creature, even if his family name is Homo,
yes.
that is capable of, I don't want to say it's symbolic thought, but how can I? Because
Certainly complex.
I don't want to use the what is symbol, what is symbolic thought. Mark making, okay,
Mhm,
that was thought to be only a characteristic not so long ago only of Homo sapiens sapiens.
mhm,
Now we accept that of Neanderthalensis sapiens as well,
yes,
and we know that Homo erectus did that too.
yes, yes,
And according to my pet hypothesis, I talked about it for 20 minutes, I think,
mhm,
uh, is all this honing down the excess information and the
yes,
confusion that is in the brain of an encephalized creature. But here we see Homo naledi. I mean, I can imagine that Homo erectus had already big brains that could store so much information.
yes, yes, yes,
Cognitive process of zooming in the contextual focus became
mhm,
necessary
yes,
in building up the reality, in being useful in tracking,
yes,
and for different purposes. Now, here's this Homo naledi, okay, who has a brain slightly bigger than that of a chimpanzee.
mhm,
And apparently, he is engaging in cognitive activities, whatever you call them, that I think that Homo erectus was the first one who was already cognitively able to do that. I
yeah. I'd be
can't,
inclined to agree. Yes.
but on the other hand, I have a very good primatologist friend. He spent years in Mali studying savanna chimpanzees on the Bandiagara escarpment. And he has noticed that chimps leave marks either in sand
Mhm,
or they consciously break bamboo stalks, they plant them, they stick them in earth,
Hmm.
and both serve navigation to resources.
Ah, all right.
This is quite interesting. I mean, it's definitely not art, okay? We don't have to decipher this behavior because the primatologist observed it,
Hmm.
but it is something very complex. A chimpanzee leaves marks so that the next chimpanzee, or him, her, at a later time, will be able to return to resources the location of which he remembers.
Yes. Hmm.
Okay?
All right. Hmm.
Now, Dr. Rothman, who observed these chimpanzees, said this, it's only hearsay as long as I'm concerned, but
Sure. Sure.
a very, very credible primatologist, she's studying chimps in Gabon, I think. She purportedly told Dr. Hoffman that her chimpanzees do also engage in mark making. They do different geometrical signs in sand.
Hmm.
That's all I know. I won't bet on that.
Right.
But
We'd
what
have to
Dr.
wait
Hoffman
for evidence.
shared with me, this mark making, this is already surprising from a chimp.
Hmm.
Now, let's say if the sand solidifies and in 100,000 years we discover an Eol, how are these called? Eolanites,
Hmm.
Aeolus, wind
Hmm.
mark,
Yes.
or sand marks, which are in the sand and get petrified, and we suddenly see a pattern. We'd say, hey, this is Homo sapiens must have been here
Hmm.
to leave these signs. So the functionality of these abstract patterns is not always what we think that it is. Perhaps it's not such a big juju.
Hmm.
Perhaps it's only a survival technique. Cool.
Understood.
Uh, yeah, that would be a nice explanation. But Homo Naledi, who knows what was in his mind? His mind must have been complex, and it's not only size that matters. Those circuits, how much information could he store in his brain? What was the need to store some
Yes.
information externally to invest labor in this? Because those dolomite, they were pretty hard. Okay,
Yes.
it takes some kind of an effort.
Hmm.
Uh, but having in mind that in a previous article, Lee Berger stated that there are signs for intentional, I don't say barrier, he doesn't say barrier only for a specific case, but disposal of the death,
Hmm. Yes.
and you find signs associated with such a behavior, at the end of the day, there may be some juju behind it.
Hmm.
Okay?
Hmm. Yes. Yes. It
Uh,
reminds me of a news story I read a few years ago. I should investigate it, more rigorously and see the scientific literature on it. But perhaps you saw it as well. Maybe 5 or more years ago. This was. I saw the video of a group of chimpanzees. At least from a human perspective, looking at it, right? Of course, we're going to maybe project some of our own ideas and values and
oh,
interpretations
we
on it,
do.
but it looked like there was something, I would say, quasi spiritual about these chimps who were throwing stones at this one particular area. This was, I believe, related to the
Three
death of
stumps. Yeah.
a chimp. Is that does that ring any bells?
Yes, I read the article. It was three stumps. They
Tree
were
stumps. Yes. All right.
Going
Very good.
across a bit, and not only that, gorillas, for instance, were observed to display emotion when they encounter a dead member
Hmm.
group,
Yes.
some kind of. Coming back to chimps, because we are closer to, it's
To
not
so
okay.
Naledi.
Let's not forget that chimps evolved on a specialized line. We had a common ancestor. Okay,
Hmm.
we evolved as a generalized being from that common ancestor, and
Hmm.
the chimp kept on specializing from that.
Yes.
So there is a big evolutionary gap between us,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
whatever the genetic
Sure.
innatedness. But chimps were observed to display what I call ritual behavior. Sometimes they engage in orchestrated vocalizations. They
Yes. Yes.
simply stand in a circle and they start hooting.
Hmm.
But whenever they decide, or whatever urge they feel to do this, to behave like that, the hootings, the pattern, the sequencing tends to be identical. It's not random.
Hmm.
This is related to how I see first vocalizations, rhythmic sequences, musical sequences, sign sequences that has already to do something with the communal memory, with the building up of a cultural identity.
Right.
And
Yes.
films socially seen are so complex.
Yes. Yes.
We still don't understand their complex social organization.
Right. Right.
They're extremely complex.
Right.
So Homo naledi could have been just as well involved in such ritual behaviors. And already being in Homo, that means that he had already some cognitive abilities
Right.
to be impressed, to have a sense, a time sense
Hmm.
of how, of that, okay,
Yes.
and to be impressed by it, and not only being impressed probably by it, but trying to understand it, to
Yes.
build to build a communally shared image of why does it happen. I don't say what happens after it, okay? I have no idea. But when
Sure.
faced with that, what is it to explain it?
Hmm.
I don't think they theorized about the seven gates to paradise. I mean,
Sure. Sure.
what happens after that. But this is enough already. When faced with that, they start thinking about it. And as I see it, striving to fabricate, to reach a mnemonic convergence, I call it,
Mm.
when memories are externally stored, so they
Yes.
become accessible to all members of the community. So it is a communal cultural memory of a given group.
Hmm.
And why not, actually? Why not? If chimpanzees already show the signs
Hmm.
of, perhaps they inherited it from a common ancestor with Homo naledi.
Yes.
Uh,
Perhaps.
Perhaps I mean, mm,
Yes. Well. Yes. Perhaps. In an email, you suggested to me that among the possibilities, right, of that particular Homo naledi etching, which right,
mhm.
which is very similar
Forgot
to
about that. Yeah.
Neanderthal, that it could perhaps also represent something, a pattern, right, in the brain or in the mind. Could you explain that for the audience? I
Well,
know what you're referring to, but
that's the only thing how I can explain it or understand it or accept it.
mhm,
What can I say? There is a resemblance, okay, but it doesn't strike me as. I mean, it's more of pareidolia in play. I mean, we already have a pattern.
mhm,
And that's what are we dealing with? There are lines actually,
Hmm.
or that there is there in the rising star cave and in the antechamber are lines.
Hmm.
Now, how can you combine lines? There are not so many ways. They have to intersect each other. They have to
Sure.
be parallel to each other.
Hmm.
They have to be above or under or different angles to each
Right.
other.
Yes.
I don't know what was in the minds of these creatures who visited the cave,
Right.
didn't live there. Um, but I think that's mere coincidence. I
All
wouldn't.
right. All right.
An explanation would be, let's say, the neural underpinnings. Like I don't want to get into this. How are they called? Entoptics. And Louis Williams came with these geometric patterns that
Right.
when
And
we are crossing into a state of altered consciousness,
mhm.
they're universal.
Yes.
They appear as a visual. Um, I don't think so.
Right. Galton, right, in the 1800s studied this, this children especially, but adults also, right? We can close our eyes and rub our eyes and start seeing these
Yes,
geometrical
yes.
patterns, and they're
And they're the
basically
same. Cross culture, it's a biological
it's a
thing.
biological. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
So either that, or there is a conscious purpose. They they share something with those who visit because if you dispose in a place of your, the place is special, no doubt about it.
Sure. Yeah. Certainly.
There was a lot of controversy. One, I read an opinion. It's unbelievable. I have to. It was so interesting.
Yes.
Someone said, yes, no problem. Perhaps they were cannibals, and that was their refrigerator. They threw the dead into the refrigerator, and they came periodically to butcher them.
Hmm.
They owned their tools at the entrance, and they cleaned it from blood when they came out. I mean, how far you can go in rejecting something that is not in your, or that you can't accept that such a so-called primitive creature, apparently not,
Right. Cognitive
can
dissonance.
display behaviors that were ours monopoly so far.
Right.
So about the credibility of, I mean, with the Gorham's Cave hashtag, uh, listen, there is two, it's either a common neural underpinning that doesn't have to
Hmm.
do anything with the huge span of time that separates the Gorham Cave from the Naledi, okay?
Yes.
A Neanderthal brain was bigger than ours at the end of the day,
That's
and
right. That's
Naledi
right.
was smaller. We don't know how many circuits did it have, how was it organized, we don't know anything. We will.
Hmm.
That's nice about both articles. They only open new avenues, and there will be a lot
Yes.
of effort following these avenues and trying to
Yes.
find out more.
Yes, well, I appreciated the point that you made in a message to me, that is regarding that Homo Naledi etching, that really we will be in a better position, right, to produce hypotheses after we have more. Well, there may never be more, but we would need more samples, more examples, right, from other caves, for instance, right,
Well, yes, I don't
yes,
think that Homo naledi was an endemic species
well,
restricted to a few square kilometers
right,
around the Rising Star cave system.
yep,
So sooner or later, and with the interest right now that will be sooner than later,
mhm,
there will be new discoveries. I mean, Lee Berger, if he made this discovery, he won't rest, and I know it, he won't rest until he proves it without any shadow of a doubt
mhm, yes, yes,
that it was like that, or that
yes.
it wasn't.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So he will search for Homo naledi. Perhaps the behavior will be displayed in other caves. perhaps
Hmm.
not. Perhaps he will have to unearth 4 or 5 caves.
Hmm.
Perhaps a Naledi fossil comes out unexpectedly from East Africa. One never knows.
One never knows. Yes.
We certainly need more.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And the same goes for Mr. Bennett's paper.
Hmm.
As I
Yes.
told you, every new, I mean, it's very restricted what he analyzes. What
Yes.
is in
Yes.
the paper? I think he analyzed more than that, but what is published in the paper as a concrete example is restricted, first of all, to Western Europe,
Yes. Yes.
okay? Then secondly, to the depth of dark caves, which makes it more interesting from my point of view.
Yes. Yes. If you,
But
as you've explained,
certainly,
yes.
both articles focus on exograms, external storage of memory or of information, which, to cite from Mr. Bennett's article, okay, who's citing Francesco De Rico as well, the most cited author
Hmm.
in the field. Uh, De Rico doesn't call these external memory storage techniques exograms. He calls them exogrammatic devices, the media, be it
Right.
bone, rock, whatever. Okay?
Sure. Sure.
He doesn't want to adopt the term. He has good reasons for that, or personal reasons.
Hmm.
However, what he says, Derico, what Bennett recognizes that
Hmm.
Derico has done much to advance our understanding of artificial external memory systems.
Hmm.
And this is important. His interest has been in the way that notational objects have been used and the implications of this for human cognitive evolution, rather than decoding the specific information they were conveying. And this is my point of view as well. I
Yes.
know there is a cognitive ability. It manifests itself in certain shapes. But as long as I'm a cultural alien and I don't have direct ethnographic sources to
Hmm.
the meaning of these abstract representations, I refrain from decoding them, deciphering them, or giving them a meaning which is meaningful only in my specific cultural milieu.
Fair enough. Yes. Yes. Well, this has been very enlightening. I'm sure the audience will appreciate all these
I hope
insights.
so.
Yes. Well, I'm
If
sure they
we
will.
switch up, okay, I hope so.
Yes. There's one last topic. I won't belabor it, but I would mention it. And if you have any reaction, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too, George. But we've been talking about cognitive, what I tend to call the cognitive apparatus, and or the cognitive abilities of Homo sapiens sapiens, and of course other species in the Homo genus.
Mhm.
But um, what I'm intrigued with um, is I think a more integrated theory of excuse me, of cognition. And what I mean by that is, right, that we a lot of experts tend to think that the brain, right, this physical organ, that the brain is the beginning and the end, right, of our cognition, right, and without taking into account that in a sense the entire human body, right, is a thinking organism, right, and right, so there are ideas, right, which are very plausible, that talk about the cognitive abilities or the sentience, right, let's say, of the kidneys, right, and the other and different organs, right, and so we're getting neural input, of course, right, from all over our body, and so that the brain is, in a sense, to be seen as the organ that coordinates, right, the cognitive abilities of the entire system, of the entire body as a whole, right, and so. what I'm hinting at here is that to understand cognition and these higher levels, right, I think we need to understand not only the brain, and we're still, as you know, we're cognitive science is still in the infancy of understanding the brain, but we've come a long way, right? Um, but I think the connection, right, of the brain together with the rest of the body, especially the internal organs, right, is very important. And we won't have an adequate and a fuller understanding, right, of mentation and cognition and consciousness until we take all of that into account. And the last point I will make on that is that's why I'm very suspicious. It seems I'm very doubtful that we can have a true artificial intelligence that is conscious, right? If we just look at the brain and try to reproduce the structures of the brain, right? The so-called brain in the vat, because in order to achieve consciousness, we need more than the brain. We need the other organs. We need the stomach as well, right? It's an integrated biological system that produces what we call consciousness, and just not the coordinating organ up here. Although that's, of course, very important. But anyway, I don't know if any of
Okay.
that
Well,
sparks
it's a
any
good
thoughts.
point. It is who tells the brain what food is good for my stomach?
Mhm,
My stomach.
mhm.
It is transmitted to the brain. The brain knows.
Yes.
It is information that the brain stores because that's where the information is stored.
Hmm.
And it is maybe the decisions. No, the decisions are made in the brain because it is the combination of information's
Yes.
type or memory traces or
Correct.
whatever.
Hmm.
But the brain doesn't make them up. The information reaches the brain via the other organs.
Yes.
And not that some intelligent design, but this is the best for our survival, for our
Yes. Exactly.
evolutionary success.
Exactly.
On the other hand, like I don't know if you're familiar with Malafudis, he
Yes. Yes.
says, yes, that consciousness is at the interface between brain and artifact or environment.
Yes. Hmm.
Not supposed to saturate in the brain, but at the interface. It is our report to the tool, to the environment that defines what consciousness is.
Yes.
In the same vein, I say that consciousness is the report to the information that we either possess on an individual level, stored in the brain, or at a collective cultural level, stored outside the brain and shared with other of our kind.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
how this implies some kind of objectivity. I see
Yes.
that information from the outside, I am in a Cartesian way, whatever, I am
Sure.
separated from that information. I can
Hmm.
manipulate it, I can judge it, I can judge by it. And there is another hypothesis that says if it's already information, we can have a holographic approach.
Hmm. Yes.
Information
Yes.
is not from inside out, but from outside in. It
Hmm.
is built in your brain, but it's not there actually.
Hmm.
It is
Right. Right.
information that gets ideally stored in your brain, and it's a make believe.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
so, what I agree with, sorry, what I
Sure.
agree with, that an approach that takes all this into consideration, I mean, it doesn't attribute exclusively to the brain all these cognitive processes, but let's say for the beginning, the environment, and perhaps after that, the kidneys or the tool
Hmm.
would be welcome.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That kind of approach.
Yes, I would see consciousness as a system that not only encompasses the entire human body, but as you were implying there, and of course there are various versions of inactivist theories, right, which would then extend the consciousness out beyond the body, right?
Uh,
And I think that does have everything to do, at least on that level, with what you were talking about, right? The interaction with tools, but of course, it doesn't stop there, right? So this, of course, is known
or the
as the
possibilities that the tool gives us,
yes,
and we build it in our cultural construct of reality.
yes, yes, yes,
Rules or those possibilities.
yes. All right.
Or
Well, the reason I mentioned this was only because, as I said, in discussions of paleontology and biological evolution, and laden with Homo sapiens sapiens and Homo Neanderthalensis and all of this, we usually are just thinking of the brain, the size of the brain, a ratio of the size of the brain to the rest of the body, and we hardly ever take into account um, the rest of the computational system, if you will, which is really, I believe, the entire human body,
we did.
and the outside quote unquote environment, right? So
We did.
yes, right. So
uh, with Homo
yes,
erectus, fire, cooking,
mhm,
that enabled the gut to take less energy, but that delegates it to the brain again. That means
yes,
give more
yes,
capacity to the brain.
yes,
No, but that's what we have. We what we have is a model. That's all.
yes. I agree. I agree.
And we can, as I said, it is we zoom in, we focus, we make a causal
Mhm.
make believe word.
Sure, sure. Yes,
That like the engravings, we have cranial capacity, we have this, we build a tree, we build a bush,
yes,
we observe certain sequences, and we have only a limited amount of tools, let's say fossils or brain imprints or
yes,
brain
yes,
volume, which we can, what can
yes,
we compare this species compared to that species? And on this we build hypotheses.
yes,
That's what we
yes.
have.
That's all we have. Yes.
In 100 years, imagine 700 years before, people were still arguing how many saints will make it through the eye of a needle.
Right, right,
Can't
right.
compare the methodology of those people who were terrorized by church, by belief, by religion,
Yes,
with how we think today. In a
yes,
100 years, it will be we'll see ourselves as yeah in baby shoes. We
sure.
don't know a thing. We
I think so. Yes,
emphasize.
yes, yes. All right, George. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank you
you
for having me. Very,
donating your time and your wisdom.
it's
And
okay. Thank you very
thank you so
much.
much.
Okay, Samuel.
All right.
So keep in touch then. Hmm?
I will. I will. If you enjoyed the program, please consider supporting this channel with a donation through Patreon or PayPal. And don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.